Today on Biblical Higher Ed Talk, we celebrate our 50th episode by sitting down with Aaron Shust, music artist, music writer, and worship leader. Aaron will be our featured artist at our February 2025 annual meetings in Orlando, Florida. Hear from a man passionately committed to using music to proclaim Christ. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE. And this is a very special podcast episode for two reasons. One, today marks our 50th episode on Biblical Higher Ed Talk. And the second reason is because we are so incredibly honored to have as our guest this week, Aaron Shust. And if you recognize, I'm sure many of you do, Aaron is an award-winning music artist. He's a music writer. He's a worship leader, and he's somebody who's committed to using music as a way to point people to Jesus Christ. And he'll be actually our featured artist at our February 2025 annual meeting. We tried to get him this past year, and it just didn't work out. So we were on the short list for 2025. And so thrilled that you're going to be with us and joining us in Orlando. And this is the first of 5 episodes this fall where I'll introduce to our listeners our 4 plenary speakers for our annual meeting, as well as today's episode where we're featuring Aaron Shust. So Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Philip, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor. Greetings to everybody.
Great. So we put together a couple questions just so our audience can get to know you a little bit more. We'll hear you obviously at the annual meeting, and I'm sure you'll share some of your story as you are with us. But just kind of tell us your story, how you came to Christ, and ultimately kind of share with us a defining moment that God used in your life that's kind of propelled you forward to where you are today.
Well, I was raised in the church. I was raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Born in Chicago, was just there for a few months, and then moved to Pittsburgh in the middle of a snowstorm. Raised there, raised in the church, and my mom, it was a small church of about 120 members, I think. It had been around, it's been over 100 years now since this church has been in existence. My grandmother was saved there in the midst of World War II. My grandfather was killed the day before Iwo Jima, and my grandmother, not a believer yet, thought that God was punishing her, and because for not going to church. So she went to church and there learned the truth that that's probably not how God was operating. And she discovered grace and the love of God and became a true, genuine follower, prayed my dad into the kingdom. And we went back, and after Chicago, I was raised there in the church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. My mom was in charge of the music. So playing the piano, picking songs for the choir, putting up her little kid, me, on stage on Sunday nights to sing solos, and piano lessons, chorus in high school. I went to college in Georgia, a private Christian school, Toccoa Falls College, to major in music, high school choral education. And it was probably, and so like basically I'm taking piano lessons and doing vocal lessons. And I have no vibrato, that little wiggle that makes vocal like interesting. And mine's just flat as a pancake. And so there was like the struggle of I have to sing these operatic songs and, things in Latin and French and all this Italian. And I just had to wiggle my head to make it sound like I had vibrato. So it was a challenge. And yet that was what I did. That's what I was doing. And I was a means to an end. I'm going to be a professor. And then I remember one day, this might be the defining moment, I would say, and I've had a few defining moments, and I would put them all into the category of being called to do something, like literally by a fellow human, like, hey, we need you to do something. Can you do this? And my response initially is, no, I'm not comfortable with that. That's not what I do. That's not my lane. That's not my skill set. And they come back and say, well, we think you can do it, and we still have a need to be filled. Will you do it? And there's a bunch of back and forth. And as the years go on, I fight less and less and less because I'm starting to see this as an opportunity that God may want me to walk into. That defining moment for me in college was we had chapel every single day at 10:20, and people would walk into the gymnasium. I was actually on the crew that set up the chairs every night and tore them down afterward. And we would sing 2, maybe 3 hymns. I think two hymns to start off the 40-minute chapel service. There'd be a message, and then we go to lunch. And yet my senior year, 1997, to pin it, the campus pastor came to me and said, we want to start incorporating some choruses, some of these, more familiar modern choruses that the kids these days like. We want to do one song while they're be like before, like 5 minutes before, and then 5 minutes afterwards, basically a 10-minute slot while people are walking in, AKA not a captive audience. And I was like, and so that was, I told you about all my pushback. I don't do that. Listen, I'm a piano major or a piano minor, a vocal major. This is not what I do. So we're talking songs like, if you remember, like It Only Takes a Spark to Get a Fire Going from like the 70s. And what's the one, Light a Fire in My Soul, a lot of fire analogies.
Yeah, I wonder why that is.
I don't know. But but like playing these songs on piano while people are walking in, and it was it was shocking. It was new for us, at least in our very conservative college, to have these songs. And I felt like I don't know, there was something that happened in my spirit, like, this is beautiful. Here we go. I recognized in that moment, this was more than just me performing a song, because I had my little band. We were playing in town, whatever. That was fun. And even talking about spiritual things, talking about the journey of faith in my band songs. But this was different, because here we are all, I'm asking people to sing words that are on a screen. It was probably a transparency for all I know. Right. Overhead projectors. But my friends, my peers are standing up and they're singing, not to me, not about God. They're singing to the sovereign ruler of the universe who hears and inhabits our praises. And that was like, wow, that this is not just 10 minutes of a non-captive audience. This is divine. And all my flat notes and all my wrong notes, it didn't change the potential for worship to happen. And that was defining for me.
Yeah. I love how you even contextualize some of those defining, because I've, in my life journey too, there are multiple defining moments that God uses. And it's neat in you sharing in your life. It's when people give you opportunities and something to step into. And so for you went on from college. You've also done worship leading. Obviously, you're an accomplished artist. You've won awards. Kind of walk us through after college. How did you launch into the career that you're in now?
Well, I mentioned that band that I put together, which was pretty much near the end of college, and I stayed maybe just a year and a half in town where the college was, for the purpose of, let's build this band with the kids that are still students. So let's not leave yet. Let's pursue this dream that I had since I was 13 and saw Michael W. Smith performing on piano, which was my instrument, but in a concert setting, singing about Jesus. I'm like, that's awesome. There's my dream job right there. So I imagined that I would graduate from college, send a demo into Nashville, and get signed right away. And that was not the plan of the Lord.
I thought that happened for everybody. Doesn't
everybody,
happen
right? The Lord was directing my steps elsewhere.
Proverbs 16:9.
Right. That was the truth. And I had to wait and I had to learn. And thank God, because I don't know what I would have said, what I would have sung, what I would have written at age 22 was not at what I experienced 7 years later when I was signed at 29. So I took a job at a church in Atlanta, Georgia, as a worship leader. And basically and it did feel to a degree a bit of hanging up the dream. There was a little bit of a surrender and sacrifice involved. And yet I was still in the same lane, so to speak. It didn't feel that way then. I felt like I was, trading it all away for a desk job. And there was a desk that I had to sit at for a long time. And then long rehearsals in the evening and long weekends, 3 services, Saturday and Sunday. But I was at least I was leading a band and singing songs, except for the audience was now very captive on a Sunday morning. And I got a lot of this, right here. This was the position. Whereas opposed to like in college when people were just having a great time. And so it felt like, okay, I had to push through that and say, it doesn't matter if people are folding their arms at me. I'm not singing to them. I'm singing to God. I'm going to demonstrate worship and they can choose to follow or not. So that was a mental exercise. And then I started writing songs for specific sermons or specific services. I mentioned surrender. I wrote a song called Give It All Away that I wrote for a Wednesday night college group that I knew the topic was going to be on surrender. So of course we chose to play I Surrender All, but I was also trying to be creative. Like, what could I write something? And maybe the answer is no. I tried and nothing came out, but this time something did. And so I, search my heart, search my mind, search my soul, make me clean, make all of my plans, all of my dreams. I lay them down before your feet. Now, after what I've told you, it was obviously partially autobiographical because I was in the process of surrendering my dreams for whatever his will might be. And little by little, these became songs that I was encouraged strongly by some people around me to consider recording. I'm like, yeah, great. Sounds like a fantastic idea. You happen to have a couple $10,000 laying around. And a friend of mine said, actually, a dream of mine has always been to build a studio and record somebody. So what do you say if I do that? Basically, if I build it, will you come? And we worked on this project together. My dream was to make a copy for my mom. And then I listened to the playback and I'm like, this is really, really good. We probably should make some copies for the church library. And then one thing led to another without, like, basically beautifully behind my back, the people who were making this album together, the studio owner, the producer, didn't tell me they were doing this, but they were shopping my record around. I just went back to the office. I'm just doing my job. I've got Sunday services to prepare for. They're shopping my record around and getting all of the rejections and not telling me. And there were all rejections until there was one acceptance. And that's when they called me up and said, hey, someone wants to sign you. And it's this record label. They're not believers. They're in Atlanta. And I checked them out and it wasn't in the Christian world. And I was like, well, this could be tricky. This could be difficult. Can we reach out to Nashville? I know there's record labels in Nashville. Like, I grew up listening to this stuff. Like, well, actually, Aaron, we've already shopped around and they all said no.
So that's when they gave you the truth.
That's when they gave me the truth. Yeah. And which was, I really appreciate that. I was never trying. I was never trying to get signed and to go through the rigmarole of shopping it and getting all, like, I was busy. God had something in my lap to do. I was trying to be faithful to what I had been given. And it's so easy to dream about the future, and that's okay. That's okay. But when I had to confess in those moments that I was spending more time dreaming about the future than attending to what God had placed in my lap in the present.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's a great stewardship lesson there. It reminds me of the parable of the talents where, it's, I find it interesting that each one of the people who received the talents didn't compare or contrast. One got 1, one got 2, one got 5. And right. the master's coming back and is going to ask, what did you do with what I gave you? And the reward is you were faithful with the little, so now I will give you. And for whatever reason, in God's economy, we're not all 5 talent people, but that's not the point. The point is to be a good steward of what I have given to you.
I often pray, God, just let me double the talent. Whatever you've given me, just let me double it. I don't want to bury it. I just want to double it.
What church was that in Georgia where you are?
That was Presbyterian. It was a PCA church, Presbyterian church in Alpharetta, Johns Creek. Now they changed the name of the city when I left.
Ah, gotcha.
I don't know.
Okay.
Now it's at Johns Creek.
Yeah. So obviously you perform. You also lead worship. You also are a songwriter. Is it even a fair question to ask? Like, out of those 3 things, what do you gravitate towards? Like, if you're waking up in the morning and you've got a to-do list, what jumps out at you to say, oh yeah, I can't wait to do that?
Songwriting. I love the songwriting. I think it's because the beginning of the songwriting process is daunting. And if you take it as a craft in and of itself, and the art in and of itself, it's a beautiful thing. And I do like to collaborate, but I feel like we sometimes box ourselves in, and I'm not sure this applies to too many other things, because painters usually don't collaborate. Pastors usually don't collaborate on sermons. Maybe they do. But in the music world, it's a normal thing. I'll speak for Nashville here, to schedule something with a person that you may or may not know, and you meet from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. You got 4 hours and you crank out a song. And then it's kind of frowned upon to go back and edit it. You have to get everyone's permission to. So it just feels like a machine, which maybe that's why it's called the industry. And I don't care for that. I love to write songs here in this room. I go over to the piano over there and I've got my Bible just sitting in front of the piano. And sometimes I jump up in the middle of my own reading time downstairs where I'm having my devotional time. And I remember one time reading through John 5 with the woman at the well, and I read through the whole passage. And at the end of that passage, Jesus spends a couple of days with the people of Sychar, and they say, to the woman at the end, like, we heard what you said before, but now that we spend time with him, we believe he's the savior of the world. And I'm like, I need to write a song called The Savior of the World. I don't know how it's going to go yet. So that original spark of inspiration is so much fun. And I would say all the way to the end of the recording process. There's something about taking this rudimentary, skeletal concept of a song and taking it into the studio. And the live performance frightens me because you got to kind of get it right. and you have to smile the whole time. But I love the idea of like going into the studio, like dark, cavernous. You got your cup of coffee and you got your friend, and you pray over this, and then you mad scientist this whole thing. Like, and you listen to it, and then you come back the next day, like, oh, let's erase the mandolin. Let's add electric banjo. Let's go crazy. Like, okay, that didn't work. Forget it. Go back to, and it's kind of fun to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it truly is an art. And you made a comment earlier. You said when you were at the age of 22, you weren't ready to write music.
I thought I was.
Yeah. So
but I'm glad I didn't.
Talk to us about that, how life experiences influence the songwriting process.
Oh, they have to, and yet I can look back, and it's not that all of my songs that I wrote in my college years, which most people have not heard, were necessarily immature. Some of them are. Some of them I think are theologically incorrect, and you have to move through and go, oh wow, I just learned something today, and I agree with that, and yet 5 years ago I wrote a song that said the opposite. So that therein lies the impetus, if that's the right word, for songwriters. Jumping around at least, whether it be as an artist, that's something that might get played as entertainment or on the radio, or even more so maybe our worship songs that also might get played on the radio or get used for entertainment. But the words that are coming out of our mouths have to be true, because they are going to inform our belief systems. They are going to inform our heart. They are going to bring us to a place either of fear or faith. And then, I don't know, the words that are being uttered into the air on a Sunday morning or whenever you are worshiping, it's not that God's going to, be like, oh, I'm going to reject that. I mean, I think, listen, I've got kids, 3 little boys who sing nonsense songs. They're getting to the oldest ones aren't doing that as much anymore, but I've got a special needs little boy who's 12, and he loves to sing. And when he sings nonsense songs, sometimes they're about me, and sometimes they're not necessarily what I would, say, well, that wasn't really praiseworthy, but it's for my son, it's for my child, and he's singing to me. So I think the Lord is probably more forgiving with our flawed theologies than we are to each other, but that doesn't change the fact that we shouldn't be really careful about the words that we put into other people's mouths. There it is. I'm writing songs that other people are going to sing, and I think I'm responsible for what words I choose. Yeah.
So in your music writing, are you writing songs that other artists then take as their own, or are you just writing for songs that you do?
That's not my goal. I think as an artist, I'm writing songs that I'm wanting to sing. I used to be on those email lists like, hey, so-and-so's looking for a new song. And it's never excited me to be like, I'm going to go in and write a song for such and such today. What would they say? Like, I want to say what I would say.
Yeah. And that makes sense, because there's like a vulnerability that is there because of what you're writing about. It's informed by life experiences. It's informed by your theology. Yeah. It's informed by whatever stage of life you're in at that particular point. And it's a piece of who you are that you're kind of putting out there. And that's that vulnerability. And I could see where writing for somebody else, it kind of contributes to the industry mentality. Well, we're just putting out another song for somebody else to sing.
Especially if it's biographical, especially if it's like, this is how I feel, this is what I think. That's kind of weird that somebody else would sing how I feel. But I try to stay away from that anyhow. I try to write words that are straight from Scripture. So
yeah. So it kind of goes into this next question. AI is something that's emerging. It's literally changing. Every time I open an email, I'm learning something else about AI. And one of the things, I mean, it's just so strange. You feed into these engines. You can have, I listened to Johnny Cash singing an Animals song, right? From they didn't even know each other, and yet right? In total clarity, as if it were Johnny Cash singing, he's singing a song that he never sang for artists that he didn't even know. So it's amazing. But at the same time, like how are you approaching it in the industry? Because I have my own thoughts about, being created in the image of God and the creativity that God has given to us. There's a lot of power in AI, but for an artist, it feels like the rug is being pulled out from under them, because we can just have AI generate songs. We don't need the people to to write them, to produce them, to actually perform them. So how have you wrestled with AI?
You know what? I'll say this as a disclaimer up front. If this becomes a time capsule and people are watching whatever I say next in the next 20 years, I might sound like the oldest of codgers already and curmudgeons. But it's a time capsule. This is how people felt back in 2024. There we go. I actually saw some artwork on social media today. I've successfully been away from social media for the past week because of a family wedding. I'm like, I just kind of forget about it. So I revisited the space and saw some beautiful paintings that just captured my attention. And I started to read the caption, and I saw that it was AI. And the person was just saying, this is something I produced with AI, and then I used my own Photoshop to touch up a little bit, and I was out. I stopped reading mid-sentence, and I just scrolled ahead because I just no longer cared. For a minute, I thought a human created this, and I was so overwhelmed with anyhow, more. As you can tell, I have not dabbled with it. One time sitting at an airport, I think like maybe the day after ChatGPT became in existence, if I'm even saying that right, I was sitting at the airport and my travel partner, my buddy, said, "Hey man, let's mess with this and see how it works." So we asked it just a couple questions, gave it a couple prompts. And one of the things we asked was, he said, "Tell me a story about Aaron Shust and his son, Michael." Now, I just told you that my youngest son has special needs. So, and it within seconds spun this whole story. Aaron Shust is a Christian artist, yada, 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 yada. One day he talked to his son, Michael, and his son, Michael, said, "Dad, tell me about it." Well, Michael's not verbal. So already, now granted, like I had already confessed, this was day one, and I get that ChatGPT is getting AI in general is getting more and more powerful every day. And should we be afraid? I don't know. Should we be really, really careful what we believe? Even more so? Probably. That sounds like wisdom. Here's my thought on absolutely we are made in the image of God. And that means probably many things, one of which certainly is the fact that we are created as creators, not capital C creators, but we're creatives. I've always shunned the compliments when they come my way of God has really gifted you. After I play a song, sing a song, do a concert, God's really gifted you with talent. And my thought, and I'm kind of demure, just kind of shrug. I'm like, thank you. And I know that's the best way to just appreciate the compliment. But in my mind, I'm thinking, you don't know how many hours of piano I had to practice when I was a kid. When my friends were playing outside on their dirt bikes, I'm inside practicing piano and singing. And I went to school for this. And this is not about praise me. This is me believing I think anybody could do this. I think if you started as a kid and poured your time and energy and efforts into it without giving up, you also could play a song on the piano and write a tune. It's a craft. And when I look at bouncing back to AI, when I see anything or hear anything, I'm like, it's an algorithm. It's artificial. So yeah, algorithms can do incredible things, but it's different than the creative process. And yet my pushback on the anybody could do it is challenged when I think of the small character in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, Bezalel. If it's that, I'm not sure how it's pronounced in NIV, but the Bezalel would be the Hebrew, or at least close to that. I actually have it opened. I was prepared for this one. I won't read the whole passage, but God says to Moses, "I have singled out Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I've filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge concerning every kind of artistry. The master of design in gold, silver, bronze, cutting precious stones," and he goes on and on and on. This guy's crazy talented, and he's in charge of decorating everything for the tabernacle. And God gave him the ability to do it. It wasn't like his mom back in Egypt made him practice gold carving as a kid. So can you develop your skills? Should we develop our skills? Yes, but there is something mysterious about the fact that God gives creativity as he will to whomever. And so, yeah, I'm a big advocate. Like, I've never even been tempted to dabble. Like, ooh, what lyrics should I write? Let me just plug it into a ChatGPT. I'll come up with some better lyrics. What melody? No, I don't even want to mess with it. Not because I'm afraid of it. It's not, maybe I should be more afraid of it than I am, but I want to keep it pure.
Yeah. No, so well said. And I think we're all, I believe very much that we probably live more in tension than we do with problems. And I see AI as one of those tension points that, okay, so it's there. is it good?
If it
Is it
helps
bad?
solve problems, if it helps a surgery go better, I'm all for it, sure. But I see it as a device. I think it's an algorithm.
And that's where I was introduced to it for the first time in LA, where film producers who are Christ followers came and kind of talked about this and they really attached that element of, look, we serve a creative God. Look around us. God created everything around us. And part of being created in the image of God is he creates all of us differently with gifts, talents, and abilities. And for some of us, we push paper well. For others, we speak well. For others, we sing well, or we write music well.
Right.
And
should the pot say to the potter, "Why have you made me thus?"
You got
I'm sure
it.
that has different connotations as well.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said there.
Yeah. So we wrestle with it. So I appreciate your perspective on that. That's certainly something that's continuing to develop. So you're going to be with us in February. Looking forward to it. Our theme for the conference is around discipleship from the Great Commission. Go and make disciples, baptizing them. So for discipleship, how have you experienced, or how has discipleship impacted your personal journey? And even go further, how are you using it today in the context of what you do in the music industry?
Well, I can tell you, I grew up with a bunch of men, friends with my dad and my church, who were they were men's men, manly men, just these, up in Pittsburgh, these, Ukrainian and Lebanese and Italian, and these men. And they were fun, but they loved the Lord so much, and they loved me. And they were kind with me and gentle with me, and yet they were fierce when they needed to be fierce, and strong, and they loved Jesus. So that definitely influenced me. One of the songs that I sang, I talked about my mom putting me up on stage. One of the songs that I sang was called "Bearers of the Light" by Michael Card, and it's 3 verses, and he talks about the relationship. Let's see if I can get them all between. I'm going to miss one. I know there's obviously a Paul and a Timothy. There's a Paul and a Barnabas, and there's another relationship, the third relationship. But basically, it's like, there's people that I'm going to follow. There's people that I'm going to walk with, and there's people that I'm going to lead. And it was a discipleship song, even though that word wasn't in it. And I sang that as solos often. What's interesting to me, beautiful, is that one of the men that I would call my mentors now is Michael Card, here in Nashville. And I've had the chance to tell him that story, that I used to sing that song more than most when I was a kid. And I've always loved sitting at the feet of people who have gone before me. If I'm a Timothy, I want to hear what Paul learned. I want to hear what Paul thinks. I want to hear what Paul did. I want to hear what Paul would recommend I not do. And I can get those answers by reading the book of Timothy and reading the scriptures. But I currently try to surround myself and like I mentioned earlier, I'm an introvert. I could stay in this room for the next year and be okay. But I force myself to get out and have coffee and have lunch with brothers who are my age, who are older than me, and who are younger than me. And I try not to. I think that the thing for probably my main sphere of discipleship right now is my 17-year-old boy, my 15-year-old boy, and my 12-year-old boy. I'm pouring into them right now. They take up a beautiful amount of my time. I'm grateful for that. But when I find myself having lunch with a guy who's like 10 years younger than me, and we're walking the road of faith together, we learn from each other, and I think it's interesting. They might see me as a Paul to their Timothy, but I probably default to seeing them as a Barnabas, as a peer, and yet I forget, these guys are 10 years younger than me. In the same way that Michael Card gets demure whenever I say, "Man, thank you for mentoring." He's like, "Well, I don't know if I'm much of a mentor, but like, you are." So there's something that it's not so defining. Like I sit there, okay, let me tell you what's the right thing to do, and we just have community together. We walk together. Different ages, different generations, different backgrounds.
And that's you look at the early church, you really look even at the Old Testament and how relationships worked and how they were modeled. And I believe that's an imprint of God's design, is and especially through COVID, we weren't designed to live in isolation. We were designed to live in community. And Michael Card was our artist 2 years ago. And I just love that man.
Love him so much.
So incredibly humble.
And I'll say this, my thing, so we talk about technology with AI. There is, I'm not anti-technology for sure. My best friend lives in Israel, and we are co-Barnabases. We encourage each other. And I'm so grateful for WhatsApp and FaceTime, and we hold each other accountable and share each other's burdens. And we don't live in the same zip code, but it doesn't seem to affect the friendship.
Yeah, but there's community there, and that's such a critical. And I love your focus that, what's the first community that we have? Well, obviously, the first community is the relationship with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
But then it's relationship with our family. And too often, I've been guilty of, for whatever reason, wrong reasons, saying, "Well, I have more important things that I need to focus in on," and you only get one chance to influence your family and disciple them along the way.
They all told me it went fast, and they were right.
And it's going fast. So, well, listen, Aaron, we're down to our last minute. This has been a fantastic conversation. What's one final word of encouragement that you'd like to leave with our listeners? These are leaders in biblical and Christian higher education.
Oh man, what's been on my heart recently is I know it's contested, but the literal reading of Scripture. When in doubt, at least. When in doubt, take it literally. Sure, there are moments, and I think as I've been sitting at the feet of Messianic Jewish friends and leaders and Pauls who have gone before me, and when I read my Bible through their lens, I'm realizing, whoa, God wasn't being too cryptic too often. Like he was, like when he said he was going to do something, that's what he meant. And I don't ever want to be guilty of standing before God one day and say, "Oh, I thought you were being figurative." There are times that whenever, we read in Revelation, the dragon, and then, or like the dry bones in Ezekiel, but there's clarification when it's figurative. Oftentimes that dragon is that old adversary, the devil himself, Satan. And it says at the end of the chapter 37 in Ezekiel that the dry bones, what are these dry bones? It's the whole house of Israel. It's not referring to our devotional life that got dry and brittle. It's referring to the whole house of Israel that God will restore, and he has in the land. It's very specific. So everything else, like when I read that God did this or that, like I'm going to default, if I'm in doubt, I'm going to take it literally. And I think that's really changed my perspective on how I share the truth of the Bible with people.
Yeah. Powerful words in a culture that resists the things of God more and more. We ought not to take away or add from Scripture. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to having you as our guest artist in February.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Philip.
Great.
God bless.
And if you're interested in finding out more information about Aaron, we'll go ahead and put his website in our show description. You will definitely recognize the songs that we place there. And I encourage you to register for our annual meeting, and you'll have the blessing of hearing Aaron Shust in concert on our Friday evening. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.